and be joined by David Gaffney. Hey, David, how you doing, man?
Hey, Jeff, good to see you again.
Good to see you. And Zach Moore. Zach, are you on as well?
And hello, hello.
Awesome, awesome. Well, David is the cloud product director. He has 13 technical certifications and over 20 years experience. He not only knows cloud inside and out, but he goes end to end from conducting our discovery workshops and consultative engagements to help customers transform their business through the adoption of cloud-based technologies. And Zach is a senior product manager focused on security and networking. And so Zach manages the broad portfolio of security and network managed services that span across all of our centers of excellence. In his 15 years with InterVision, he's been a key contributor in the development and implementation of hundreds of security and operations related customer projects. So with that, David and Zach, take it away.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for that amazing introduction, and apologize in advance for all my nerdy technical certifications, but it helps me keep well grounded and helps me stay in the forefront of what it is we're trying to do here at InterVision. So I'm going to bring up a deck and kind of walk you through our topic today, which is really security in the cloud. And as Jeff says, I've been doing this, providing IT management infrastructure solutions for the last 20 years. And in the last 20 years, I've seen a lot of change, but most significantly is the change to the cloud. When I started in this business a while back, you had different groups that had to do everything. You had a network group, you had a security team, you had a server team, you had a load balancing team, you had all this kind of stuff. And one of the beauties of the cloud is that you can have one interface that allows you to configure everything. And it's kind of exciting. You don't have to know all these different proprietary protocols. You can use your knowledge of that interface and some tools and really configure an application in a virtual data center. So super excited to be here. We're going to talk a little bit about configuration management in the cloud. It's really important, and just wanted to kind of get into some of the details here. So as Jeff mentioned, I am the product director for cloud. My primary role here at InterVision is to oversee our managed cloud services. But today I'm really going to talk about configuration management. So, everybody I think on this call is aware of the reasons why so many people are moving workloads to the cloud. There's a lot of benefits, right? It makes it really easy to provision high availability, unlimited scalability, rapid deployments, pay-as-you-go pricing, no need to purchase capacity in advance. It's allowed developers to achieve faster time to market, accelerating development, using fast deployments, infrastructure as code, and that sort of stuff. But for some people, the question remains, is the cloud secure? And the answer is, it depends. Cloud providers have a shared responsibility model, and that means you, as the customer or the end user, must do your part. So, of course, what you're responsible for in the cloud really depends on the type of service that you're using. So, as you can see on the slide here, there's three main services that they talk about in the cloud: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. But the one that requires the most configuration on your part is infrastructure as a service. So things like identity and access management, network routing, security groups, access control lists, encryption at rest and in transit, operating system patching, those are all customer responsibilities. Cloud security breaches, they constantly make headlines, but yet in nearly every case, it is the end user and not the cloud provider that failed to manage the controls used to protect the data. So instead of asking, is the cloud secure, a better question to ask is, am I using the cloud securely? To help customers meet their obligations under the shared responsibility model and assist with proper configuration, public cloud providers have created frameworks to define best practice configurations, as well as training modules which support these. These well-architected framework guidelines can have as many as 300 checks that users need to validate on each workload. And so for many customers, that can be an arduous task. The security pillar in particular involves ensuring continuous security posture and compliance. Things like setting up security governance guardrails, assessing vulnerabilities, assessing your workload design against industry standards such as PCI, DSS, NIST, and more. And then, of course, implementing security controls, both proactive and detective. And in addition to the well-architected framework, cloud providers have created these cloud provider advisory tools. So AWS has Trusted Advisor, Azure has Azure Advisor, and both tools perform checks of your environment against best practice configurations and provide recommendations to improve reliability, security, cost effectiveness, performance, and operational excellence. Yet, despite all this, misconfiguration is common in the cloud. In fact, the National Security Agency believes that cloud misconfiguration is the #1 threat to cloud security. They created a report that goes into detail highlighting some cloud misconfiguration horror stories that have impacted the Department of Defense and the defense industry. And so if you think about that for a second, these people, the DoD and the defense industry, they are trained extensively on security. It's part of their mission statement. So I guess my point is, if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. So let's take a look at the top cloud misconfigurations. Trend Micro compiled a list of the most
Hey, David, we do have a poll that we've asked our listeners and viewers to answer this question. So let's give them a couple more seconds to answer and see what they think are the top cloud misconfigurations.
Okay, I didn't see the poll there.
That's
Displaying
all right. That's what I'm here for, man. I got
all
your
good.
back.
All good. All I see is the deck. So
Yep. So go ahead and we'll come back to the answers when we've given them enough time to respond to the poll. So keep going.
all right. So Trend Micro, one of our partners, has compiled a list of the most common cloud misconfigurations based on the results of its tools. One of its tools, Cloud Conformity, and that reviews cloud environments for misconfigurations as well as adherence to best practices. And here's the results. So according to that information they provided, across all clouds, the #1 is disabled monitoring and logging. Secondarily would be security groups where you've got unrestricted inbound and outbound ports. And then the third is lack of validation. And so, even though lack of validation is not a configuration per se, it's a huge risk to you and your environment to assume that things were configured correctly and that they remain so. And so I think that's really why that was highlighted. But again, in a more cloud-specific area, AWS, the number one misconfiguration in AWS is CloudTrail disabled. And so if you think about that, AWS CloudTrail is really what's used to log all the API calls to the cloud portal, which tracks basically what users are doing. So if you don't enable CloudTrail, you're not going to know who took what action was taken, when the action took place, and what resources were affected by the action. So really important to make sure that is enabled. The next top misconfiguration is EBS encryption not being enabled. So that could potentially expose the data stored on EBS volumes as well as any snapshots taken from those volumes. And then third is S3 public access not blocked. So by default, S3 allows public access, but if you're storing, business or proprietary documents out there, it may be a good idea to block that access unless you have a specific use case for enabling public access there. For Azure, the top misconfiguration was Azure Advisor Service not enabled. The second one was Azure Activity Log not enabled. And then the third was a rule that prevents the installation of non-approved extensions on Azure virtual machines. When vulnerable extensions are used in Azure environment, it can lead to elevation of privilege and remote execution attacks. So really kind of interesting stuff there. Hope I didn't give away the answers, Jeff, but there's no wrong answers here. So let's talk a little bit more about configuration management and why it is so important in the cloud. Configuration management helps ensure that systems are configured and maintained in a consistent, reliable, and secure manner. Consistency is important. In a cloud environment, multiple instances of the same resource are often created, and consistency across these instances is critical. From a security standpoint, proper configuration management helps ensure that all security controls and configurations are properly implemented and maintained. And then scalability is one of the essential features of cloud. Scalability requires automation tools such as infrastructure as code for creating and managing templates for resource deployment. And finally, compliance can be facilitated using configuration management tools to ensure that all resources are configured in accordance with regulatory guidelines. So here is that poll question that Jeff alluded to earlier.
Yes, so here was the winner, so to speak, from our audience. Oversized compute instances was the number one guess of what, or maybe from experience, the top cloud misconfiguration. So oversized compute instances. How does that impact security, David or Zach?
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily a security concern. And while there is a lot of over provisioning in the cloud, it's really not as much of a concern for security. What that means is you're paying more for your resources than you need to. And this we see this quite a bit, especially when you're migrating to the cloud. There's the tendency to want to give your application all the resources that it needs. And by default, developers a lot of times want to give extra horsepower to compute instances so that their application doesn't slow down or they don't receive performance bottlenecks. And while that might be a good approach for initial migration into the cloud or while you're testing, over time you're going to end up paying more than you should. So, this is another aspect where you really need to validate, right? So I might have deployed this resource on this compute or this compute instance for this application, but it's good to go back and validate whether or not that's been right sized. And so those advisory tools that I mentioned earlier can actually go in and provide recommendations as to what the correct size compute instance, so the correct family class of compute instance ought to be for those resources. But according to Trend Micro, that's actually not the correct answer, even though oversizing compute instances does happen quite a bit in the cloud. It's actually just not setting up logging for both CloudTrail as well as CloudWatch logs in AWS. So I hope I didn't blow their chance at a good prize there, Jeff.
No, you didn't. Yeah, let's keep going, man. Thank you for that poll question, and we'll turn it back to you for more content, David.
You bet. So let's talk a little bit about the cloud provider tools. In addition to the advisory tools that I also mentioned, the cloud providers have provided configuration management tools. So AWS has AWS Systems Manager, and Azure uses Azure Automation. And these tools can help automate operational tasks such as patching. So really important to sort of set those things up, because once they're set up, they're going to continue to run, and you're not going to have to manage and make sure that those are being handled. Can really kind of ease up the burden operationally from patching standpoint as well as other operational tasks. Infrastructure as code tools, so AWS CloudFormation and Azure Resource Manager. These allow you to deploy resources from templates to ensure consistency. You can also use these tools for drift detection to identify configurations that have drifted away from the ideal or the desired state. And then there's, of course, cloud policy tools. So AWS has something called AWS Organizations Service Control Policy. Azure uses Azure Policy. And what these do is these limit the actions that users can take when it comes to resources in a cloud environment. The way that they're actually set up is a little bit different. AWS organizations, service control policies prevent actions being taken at the account level, whereas Azure policy does it at the resource level. But at the end, they have the same effect. They can prevent you from doing things that you don't want to do or you shouldn't do, or you should only do on an exception basis. So we talked earlier about enabling public access to cloud storage. You could set up a service control policy to disable public access to cloud storage, which would prevent anybody from configuring that. So it really prevents you from doing things that you've decided, or as an organization, that you shouldn't do. The other thing that's nice is the cloud providers have lists of highly recommended guardrails, right? So just by setting those up and deploying those, you can ensure that your environment is secure and that you're less likely to have configuration issues. So what can you do to make the cloud more secure? Well, first of all, first and foremost is understand the shared responsibility model. Make sure your people are trained on configuration best practices and trained on the platforms themselves. And then take advantage of the tooling provided by cloud providers such as infrastructure as code and monitoring tools. And then integrate that tooling so that, for example, you're setting up monitoring using infrastructure as code templates instead of configuring it manually. You can also ensure that the people in the process, that you have the people in the process necessary to configure and deploy the tools. And then when it makes sense, of course, consider using third-party tools. These tools, though, only work if you have people whose job it is to monitor, review, and validate the findings. So most importantly, they only work if you give your people the time to do this. We're all very busy. We all wear a lot of hats. So if you do not make this a priority, it's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen on regular prescribed intervals. So give your people the time to do this, make it a priority, develop and implement defined processes, and of course, use automation. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that InterVision has a managed service that assists in configuration management, InterVision's managed cloud services. It starts during the onboarding process where we run a security assessment tool. That tool evaluates your configuration against best practices. We then present findings to you, and then we consult with you, and then we actually remediate those non-best practice configurations. So we get your environment up to where it needs to be in accordance with best practices. From there, we will set up guardrails. We will configure the cloud policy tools such as AWS organizations or Azure policy to ensure that you're not able to configure things that you shouldn't be configuring, or that would put your organization at risk. And then finally, you can set up configuration management tools so that we can monitor and alert on misconfigurations. So AWS config or Azure policy, so that if there is something that's out of compliance, we will get alerted on that. It's just part of the overall broader suite with MCS. So in addition to configuration management, it also includes event incident management, 24/7, change management, security management, patching, backups, and cost optimization. So this is a modification of the shared responsibility model for the slide. And as you can see with InterVision's managed cloud services, we can take responsibility for a number of those things, freeing you up to focus on applications and data and those things that actually add more value, the most value to your company, while at the same time ensuring that your environment is secure and managed according to best practices. And this is for the case for not just server-based environments, but also for container-based environments, whether that's Azure Kubernetes Service or Elastic Kubernetes Service, whether it's a serverless environment, whether you have DevOps automation or CI/CD pipelines. We can provide management services for all that. And we can also provide managed cloud protection, which is a security service that provides detect and respond services on top of Trend Micro Cloud One. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Zach Moore, who is going to talk about third-party tools and services in the cloud.
Thanks, David. So as Jeff introduced earlier, you can keep sharing that deck, David.
I was just,
So it got passed over to me. Okay.
there you go.
Just a moment, let me- Can we pass it back to David to continue sharing that? Awesome. So my name is Zach Moore. I'm the product manager for security and networking with InterVision. I started out here about a decade and a half ago in our operations center. And during my time there, I worked on just about every technology out there. So, between your infrastructure, resiliency, communication, data center, cloud. I started focusing on security about 7 years ago. And since then, I have led our customer-facing SOC, Security Operations Center. I have co-run our incident response program. I have helped to stand up numerous security services, just about everyone we have managed at this company. And these varied roles have given me a great deal of experience dealing with the pain of trying to make piecemeal arrays of different technologies and partners, often stitched together with little more than hope, make these work together to achieve our clients' business outcomes and keep them safe. And unfortunately, this time has also presented me with many opportunities to witness firsthand what usually happens when these patchwork ecosystems, often paired with a lack of preparation, face attacks from determined malicious actors. And let me just say that the best time to start taking security seriously is not the day after you've been breached. And many of our customers only take this to mind too late. So next slide, please, Dave. So why do I bring up patchwork ecosystems and poor planning? To understand the issue inherent here, we have to understand what security is. So in the world of IT, business needs are most often addressed with tools. You need email, get O365 or Gmail, or if you need on-prem, Exchange. Need to collaborate, WebEx Teams, Microsoft Teams, Slack. Need ticketing, ServiceNow or ConnectWise or Zendesk. Need security? What do you buy? What we've got pictured here is just the tip of the iceberg. The security space is fragmented and diverse, with vendors rarely hitting double-digit market share in any given niche, and there's a lot of niches. So with that in mind, you have to understand there is no silver bullet. There is no one tool or product that solves security, because security is not a standalone business function. Security is a layer that goes on top of every functional aspect of your business. And as such, there are many, many tools available to fill a variety of specific niches. So you can go to the next slide. So the next question here is, how does one deal with all this? The problem of solving the problem. There are steps you can follow to sort through it all. I'm sure everyone here has touched on at least some part of this, but we often see clients go part of the way and then stop because they don't have the time, they don't have the focus, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the budget. And that can kill your effectiveness. So from end to end, first you have to identify all the security segments that you need to address. Next, you need to identify and evaluate the tools of the very many tools out there that map to each of the segments and select something best in breed that fits the space. Next, you need trained experts to implement the tools. Then you need those trained experts to continue running with the tools. So if you've got different implementation teams and different running teams, now you got even more people that need expertise, more certifications. Then you need trained experts to build processes around those tools and map those processes to your specific business needs so that you don't find that as you try to operate, you're falling short. And if this sounds complicated and potentially exhausting, that's only because it is. There are ways you can make it easier. Finding a trusted provider who's already done most of the work is one of the easiest. Since this is a cloud security presentation, I'm going to run through a cloud environment from the ground up and identify both the main security segments that need to be addressed, as well as, for example, how some of our services can help you cover them. So if you want to go to the next slide. So it all starts at your infrastructure, as David covered earlier. The cloud is just someone else's data center, and the equipment and infrastructure within that data center, from your point of view, is just provisioned as code. You may have virtual servers and workloads and serviceless applications, containered applications, file storage, scaling platinum resources, and more. Every cloud is different, and that's how it works in the cloud is going to be different too. fundamentally different from how it works in on-prem environments. As such, the first and most foundational element you need for cloud security is expert administration. As David discussed earlier, tools for this are mostly cloud native. So the technology part is easy, it's already there. It's the people and processes that get tough. When you need changes made to your cloud environment, you need certified experts with knowledge of best practices and change management procedures to execute those changes so that you're not leaving those holes that David talked about that the NSA identified that came up on our top misconfigurations. Those get exploited by malicious actors. InterVision fills this gap with our managed cloud services solution that David alluded to earlier, where our certified experts and engineers with years of experience and certifications in these cloud platforms work with you to implement the environment and make changes ongoing over time as it is required to fit your business and compliance needs. This builds the concrete foundational base for your cloud security, ensuring that all the complex and often misconfigured elements are locked down, including your role-based access, management, encryption, network access, and more. Once you build that solid foundation, you need to regularly check to make sure that cracks haven't appeared as it evolves during the course of operation. So that'll bring us to our next need. You can hit the next slide. So this is that ongoing validation and auditing piece. You may ask why the ongoing verification is needed if you set it up with best practices. And the answer is things change. There'll often be multiple major design projects running in tandem that may cause unforeseen gaps to form, or application developers who maybe aren't trained in cloud or making cloud changes to suit their applications. You may have changes in framework, compliance needs, cyber insurance requirements, and any of these can leave holes, can leave gaps in your secure environment that malicious actors, again, can use to create a breach. With this in mind, it's crucial to have a plan in place to address auditing of your config over time, not just upfront. These audits can be recurring one-time checks, such as well-architected framework review, or they can be part of a constant program of configuration management through oversight like cloud security posture management, with some of the tools pictured here. InterVision has services built around both of these models, taking advantage of industry-leading software such as Cloudsploit and Trend Microconformity, as well as all your cloud-native tools such as AWS Config and Azure Policy. And these services can plug directly into our managed and professional services to quickly translate findings into fixes, meaning you quickly close the holes as they're identified so the bad guys don't have time to exploit them. This minimizes your exposure and business risk over time. So now we've got your sturdy walls that are built well, and you've got your auditing and configuration management to make sure that they stay strong over time. Let's go to the next major need, which is guarding your perimeter to ensure that if the malicious actors do get in, they don't get anywhere with it. If you can to the next slide. So zero-day attacks exist. Supply chains can be compromised and humans can be phished. Encryption can be cracked, and what this means is that even with the best vulnerability and configuration management programs, any environment can still be compromised. And for this reason, you need to ensure that all aspects of your cloud environment are not just well configured, but are actively protected as well. In these modern days of cybersecurity, zero-day exploits and people getting paid large amounts of money to run an as-business model of attacks on the internet, it's no longer a question of will I be attacked, but when will I be attacked? So with workstations and servers on-prem, it's pretty easy. You get a solid endpoint protection tool, deploy it everywhere, and you might be done. With the cloud, there may still be servers, but those are alongside other types of workloads, serverless applications, containered apps, file storage, scaling platform resources, infrastructure as code, and more. So how do you protect all that without deploying half a dozen different tools? Well, easy, you get managed cloud protection. A single best-in-breed software protection platform that spans the gamut of cloud resources, server to serverless, storage to dev chain. And the only tool that you need is provided. But you don't just need the tool, you also need the people and processes built around it. which is why InterVision would provide a 24/7 by 365 team of experts to manage it, alert on it, and provide remediation guidance around it. And again, you can tie that into other services to take those remediation actions on your behalf. So here it's all about reducing the mean time to detect, isolate, and remediate, aka reducing downtime and business impact caused by these determined malicious actors. If you want to go even broader, you can provide better event correlation, not just with your cloud, but tying it in with the rest of your organization by combining managed cloud protection with managed detection and response, or MDR. What MDR does is it pulls together all of those sources of security telemetry, including all of the native cloud logging setups, including managed cloud protection in the platform there, combines it with all of your endpoint infrastructure, authentication, telemetry from other SaaS apps, pulling in information from dark web and looking for credential compromise and things like that, and pulling it all together into one powerful analytical platform with alerting capabilities. And that's how you get your true organization-wide visibility for the biggest reduction in cyber risk and the greatest reduction to ongoing incident response and recovery costs. So if we can hit the next slide, Dave. So poll time. How confident are you in your cloud security? How confident are you that you have the best in breed tools? How confident are you that your configuration is solid and free of gaps? How regularly do you check your setup to make sure things haven't changed? How carefully do you monitor your environment for threats? Do you have incident response plans, 24/7 monitoring? Are you prepared to deal with an attack at 2 a.m. on a holiday weekend? That's not just hyperbole. The bad actors know when you're the most vulnerable and they plan to attack then. That's why you see a lot of Monday morning panicked calls after holiday weekends, because the bad guys have already been in the environment for 3 days while you're on the beach shipping Mai Tais. So let's see what people had to say.
Yeah, so Zach, it looks like not very many people are sleeping well at night because the extremely confident was one of the lowest rated ones. Next was confident. They sleep most nights. Somewhat confident. They're sleeping lightly every night. And then we had one person that's just not sleeping at all. Now, I don't know if that's because of cybersecurity or they're drinking too much caffeine.
Yep.
But my guess is it's probably cybersecurity.
And that maps to what we see in incident response. That maps to what we're hearing in our conversations. Security is complex, and it takes an expert to even audit what you have, which we have experts that can help you do that if you need the help. So can you hit the next slide, David? So let's wrap things up. Once you put all these pieces together, you get the whole picture, right? Solid foundational base of ongoing configuration management, regular, well-architected or compliance-based reviews of your applied cloud infrastructure to ensure it stays secure. Whole platform protection, not just protection of a few pieces. Cover all your varied elements for cloud operations. Broad spectrum visibility, covering your cloud as well as the rest of your environment, because there is cross-correlation there and access between resources to make sure that anomalies and compromises are detected. And putting these all together and operating it, having people that can monitor it 24/7 and do what needs to be done. That's how you get the most important need in security, which is defense in depth against the malicious actors out there that would love nothing more than disrupt your cloud and security operations just to line their pockets. So if you get these services from a trusted experienced partner, such as InterVision, then underneath the hood, there may be close to a dozen best-in-breed tools, all pre-selected and vetted, all run by industry experts, and all wrapped in processes designed and tested against years of real-world scenarios and incident response. Because if you have your technology without people and process, it's expensive, it's shiny, and it's ultimately useless. People without technology and processes are idle and ineffective, and processes without technology and people, well, they may as well not exist because there's no one to execute. So without all three of people, process, and technology, security cannot be achieved. Even worse, you may think you have it, but it may be an illusion and you're at risk without even knowing it. These are the situations that lead to hard lessons learned at our incident response tables, which we offer those services too because they're needed. Hopefully you won't need them. So with inflation and market uncertainty, IT budgets today are often lean by necessity. And interestingly enough, in times of economic downturn, the frequency of cyber attacks often heads in the opposite direction, trending upwards while the market tanks. And this is by design. The bad actors know that security is often not a focus when budgets are tight, and that's their ideal time to strike. With that in mind, don't fall for the trap and put your business at risk. With the average cost of cybersecurity breaches topping $4 million these days, skipping on security to save pennies today can often end up costing you millions tomorrow. So the bottom line is, you could do it yourself, but will you? Cloud security is complex and requires a diverse set of tools and skills that often doesn't translate from traditional on-prem IT. So beyond that, it's not just the knowledge of how to operate in the cloud, but also the tool selection process, the training and the expertise required to run the tools, and the experience required to build the appropriate processes to integrate them. Do you have the people and time to do this? Are they making it a priority? If not, consider working with a service provider such as InterVision and let us know how our expertise can translate to better outcomes for you and improved return on investment for you and your business. That's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, so we do have some questions that I will toss out to either one of you two. I'll let you arm wrestle over who's gonna answer. The first one I think applies whether you're talking cloud security or even on-premises security. But Ashley asked, she says, I was reading how resold corporate routers hide a lot of corporate secrets, which could be exploited. What is the risk factors in used company tech equipment not being properly wiped when resold? And is there any training that addresses this kind of vulnerability? So I'll toss that out to either one of you.
I would have to, I would say, yeah, anytime you've got a hard drive, be it solid state, be it a flash card, be it physical security, physical storage, one wipe is often not enough. That's why, if you have a hard drive in a computer or something like that, there are programs that can do like 7 magnetic wipes of it or something and just randomly putting gibberish on the drive.
Yeah.
If you're just going out and deleting your config and then handing it off, that config may be retrievable, which may have things like passwords, it may have user listings, it may have your routing and your IP information, and someone that buys that from you may be able to recover that and use that to exploit the next gear you put in place, which is often just going to have a copy paste to your config.
Yeah.
As far as training on how to deal with that, I would say talk to our virtual CISO team, talk to our professional services teams, and we've got guidance on equipment refresh and replace that we can help you walk through that.
Excellent. Hey, thanks, Zach. David, how often you talked about one of the top issues is in configuration management. So how often do you recommend customers evaluate their cloud configs?
Well, I mean, ideally, it's a continuous evaluation, right? Do it all the time. There are tools out there that can run continuously and evaluate your configurations in the cloud in real time. But if you don't have those tools, it's important to, most importantly, assign the task, right? Make it a task owner. Give this tasks to somebody to do configuration management checks in your environment. Make this a priority. Make sure they have time to actually do it, and then make sure that it's reported on. So make it a task, give it an owner, make it a priority, and then get reporting done on it. And that way, it's actually done. And that's really kind of the best way to do it if you're not going to do some sort of continuous configuration management program.
Do you see AI playing a role in this now or in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that that market is exploding now with great ideas, and there's a lot of smart people looking at the tools like AI ops that are going to help, you know,
Yep.
identify, you know, best practices and how to remediate. I'll do maybe even do an auto remediation. But on the flip side, there's also bad actors that could use those same tools for the reverse effect, right? And so it's a little bit of a, you know, I wouldn't say an arms race, but more of a just a challenge, right, to make sure that you're two steps ahead in front of the bad guys.
It is kind of that cat and mouse kind of thing. Zach, when you were talking, you had a slide that showed just some of the many logos of security tools that are out there. When we go in and evaluate a customer's environment, how many security tools are you seeing in their cloud environments when we take a look?
It varies widely. Because there are so many tools and the space is so fragmented, there are hundreds of different tools. I mean, if you just look at what can I use endpoint wise to protect a server in the cloud or on-prem, I could probably name off the top of my head 20, 30 tools for that one piece. Going wider to, you know, what is out there to look at containers, what is out there to look at, you know, edge, what is out there to monitor. You can go on for days. And that means that when a customer comes to us, we're going to see a laundry list. And that goal is to standardize and make sure that what you have works together and that all the people running all those different tools and those various aspects can talk to each other. Because you don't want to be in a breach situation and you've got 5 different tools run by 5 different providers and they don't talk to each other because they don't have, you know, LOAs or NDAs or whatever they need.
Yeah.
And so you're stuck, you know, days into a breach and you're still trying to get your security groups to work together.
Yeah. That really makes it a challenge. And rationalizing your security tools can be a great step, especially when we're talking in this environment about the economic situation where we're maybe doing a little belt tightening. Maybe there's an opportunity to rationalize some of those tools. One of the questions that comes up a lot, this is related to the shared responsibility model. Do you see that companies are able to, I'll use the word fast track, but they're able to solve some of their compliance issues because of this shared responsibility model? In other words, does it help with the compliance frameworks that many of our clients find themselves under? And either one of you, Zach or David, either one.
Well, I think, you know, the shared responsibility model identifies best practices. And so it can help with basic frameworks for, you know, compliance frameworks, right? But I think it's important also to, if you are tied to a specific compliance framework, to make sure that you have specific tooling and processes and training specific to that compliance framework so that your environment is compliant. Now, that being said, what you can do is use the some of the cloud provider tools and third-party tools to ensure that your environment is conforming to those third-party compliance frameworks as well. And you can use tools like infrastructure as code with drift detection to make sure that if something gets out of compliance, that it's alerted on and remediated. And sometimes those things can even be auto remediated in the cloud. So yeah, that's a great question, Jeff.
Yeah, I love that because they do provide a lot of guidelines that can help. And as you say, there's a lot of tools available to help you monitor your own compliance. It used to be said that compliance was kind of a check the box kind of routine. And now with the tools, that becomes more continuous. Well, guys, I want to thank you for spending time with our attendees today. I think this has been very valuable. Security is always top of mind, and this has helped a little bit navigate some of the complexities of cloud security. And Rob, I wrote down, or not Rob, sorry, Rob's coming up next. Zach, I wrote down one of the things that you said that I'm going to steal because I love this quote: the problem of solving the problem. I love that.